Hey, how's everybody doing? It's been a while, but we're back here with another episode of Coffee Talk with Brohawk. And today I have my friend Ben Gertz joining us, and we're going to talk a little bit about training today. So, Ben, without further ado, can you tell our audience a little bit about you and what have you been up to these days?
Yeah, of course. Well, hey, first off, thanks for having me on, Mark. I've watched many episodes of yours, and I'm honored to be considered among many of the candidates to be in here. So I really appreciate that. Um,
Thank you very much.
yeah, and so still loving L&D. That's really where I live. So I've spent the last 15 years. Just for those who don't know me, I've spent about 15 years in the learning and development space. I've kind of ran the gamut of things. I've worked as a content developer, instructional designer, trainer. I've worked with consulting and strategy building around leadership and development, and I've also helped lead the learning and organizational development for a few organizations.
Excellent. Um, I've been fortunate enough to collaborate with you, but then also learn from you as well in some of the work. So I mean, I can definitely vouch for how amazing you are and what you do. So
Oh,
um,
thanks. Well, I appreciate that, and the money's under your seat for giving me the props. But no, it's what I
excellent.
love. It's what I love to do. I live and breathe it. I've all my education, my own personal training, my career, all that's been focused on learning and development. That's my thing.
Excellent. As we've talked about before, I mean, when you have a passion to do something well, it never feels like you work a day in your life. And you the proof is in the pudding with the stuff that I've seen you do. I mean, it's absolutely amazing, Ben. So with that, one of the things that I think is a huge byproduct of having a great onboarding and learning and development process and training, either new hire or existing training, is it feeds into whatever the organizational culture is. What does organizational culture mean to you? And where do
Yeah,
you see the foundations for having an engaging culture begin?
that's a great question. How much time do you have to go through org culture? But no, it's uh what one of the things that I think about with organizational culture I think is important
Mhm.
to discuss is oftentimes I hear it about like organizational culture is a reflection of values and the organizational's mission, and I tend to think that it's more of a barometer of those things and less of a reflection in the sense that are how well are we actually executing on those values, and what are they like in practice. I think that is what culture kind of tells us. So I
Okay.
think to answer your question more bluntly, I mean, I think organizational culture is everything. It has everything to do with retention. It has everything to do with productivity. It has everything to do with gains in the organization. Without a
Mhm.
solid culture, it's tough. So it's important.
Okay.
And I certainly think that training plays a place in the foundation of culture. I think it's a holistic approach that begins with leadership and is really, it starts there. But training and a great onboarding plan, those sorts of things feed into the organizational culture. But it's a massive animal to kind of get control over. But that's kind of the way I think about it, though, is it's more of a reflection on how are we executing on those values and the mission and the principles of the organization. I think is what we kind of see as a result of culture.
So it's not a mural on a wall or a virtual wall. That's not what culture is. Just a big
No.
picture, a big pretty picture that somebody says, "Oh, this is our culture." So
Yeah.
it's not that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes we fall into that trap. Like if we define our values and we define the things that we want to be as an organization, that's
Mhm.
fantastic. Like that's a start in the right direction. But the
Yep.
execution on that is really what is measured in culture, I think, because
Hmm.
you can say you're, as an example, an inclusive culture, but is
Hmm.
that really the experience of the people? That's kind
Right.
of where the disconnect may be. And I think culture is more of a reflection on the execution of those values, as opposed to, like you saying, you can't just paint a beautiful mirror on a wall and say, well, that's it, we're done. We did all the thought work and everything we needed. So here we go. But
Yeah.
although
For
that's
for
certainly a piece of it, but
Yeah, I mean, for those viewers who have never worked in an actual contact center or an actual office, a lot of the art, sometimes there's artwork in brick and mortar locations that actually represented culture. I know we're in a hybrid and totally remote world these days. So just want to put some context around the mural on the wall. Um, so, you mentioned a little bit about onboarding. What is, when it comes to onboarding, how does that really fit into creating that culture? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit here, but I think you may have some really good examples about good onboarding processes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I know the audience is call center based, so the analogy to me is the first impression with your customer on the
Hmm.
phone is really sort of analogy of onboarding to your employees as well. It's you'd want to not only just put your best foot forward, but make sure that they're prepared. It's a great place for setting expectations, defining the role, and making sure that they're supported as much as possible. And I think training plays a big piece in this, because
Hmm.
part of learning and development is understanding the folks that need to interact with that new employee and consolidating a plan around their learning through their
Okay.
process of joining an organization. And it's something that it doesn't have to be this gorgeous process necessarily either. It can be as simple as, if you're doing nothing today,
Uh-huh.
identify the objectives that they got to do and complete, and identify the people who can teach them to do those things, and have them
Yes.
meet. Just something even as simple as that is much more effective than no onboarding. And you would be surprised how much someone appreciates that sort of effort and thoughtfulness about their onboarding into their new career. And it makes a big difference. It sets the stage for how you are as an organization, how they feel
Yep.
supported, and ultimately their role.
And some of that setting of the tone can really be measured, though. Would you say in retention out of training? Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know,
I think that's a big piece,
yeah.
especially for if we're talking onboarding in the for like a frontline agent as an example.
Yep.
I think that is it's important across the organization, but I think
Yes.
if I had to pick one, you know what I mean? Like, it's very critical at the frontline level that the
Yep.
onboarding process provides them the skills and the necessary knowledge and abilities to be successful in their role. I mean, that's huge. On top of that, it's the time for them to understand the organization's values, their
Hmm.
culture, kind of like we were chatting about, and be able to make those uh the right fit, and making sure that you're providing that support.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm going to switch gears on you a little bit here, Ben.
Sure.
So, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing training professionals today?
Yeah. Yeah. This is definitely in my wheelhouse here. I think, we were chatting kind of the other day, and I think we touched on a little bit where when COVID happened, we were the training world was kind of like, okay, well, we'll just do virtual training for now, for
Yeah.
just a little bit. Let's just get through this. Let's kind of move through. Okay, we're hybrid now. Okay, we're just gonna do be hybrid for a little bit. And
Uh-huh.
suddenly it's like you just hit this wall, almost 4 years later, and you're like, well, wait a minute. Like, when did this happen? We don't do in-person training anymore. I mean, it does happen, but it's so rare.
Yeah.
Almost all of training, especially in the contact center space, is remote now.
Uh-huh.
And I think one of the biggest challenges facing professionals today is adequately, pivoting and dealing with that in a way that's
Hmm.
successful. I think
Okay.
there's another challenge, if that kind of goes hand in hand with that as well, is in I think in the real world with training and organizations, we don't have this unlimited budget world where you can have like the instructional designer, and then you have your facilitator, and then you have your content developer who's kind of feeding into this machine, and you have these components that have the feedback loop with QA, and you're developing all this training. And it's so rare to see an organization that has that structure. And the reason I bring this up is, especially in today's climate, the trainer needs to be the designer. They need to be the facilitator. They need to be the one who's managing that feedback loop, and they're oftentimes creating the content. And
Yep.
there's a wild skill gap between each of those, even though they're all interrelated to our outcome.
Hmm.
It's definitely their own unique challenges, and I think that's a challenge today, is developing those skill sets properly for the trainer. But
Um, are there things that are there professional training strategies for trainers that can be entered into their world? I mean, we talk a lot about frontline leadership development and frontline training and leadership development. But, it would be great, honestly, if Ben, if you had a service out there that actually trained
Yeah.
trainers how to do all the things that you just talked about.
Yeah.
Is that, talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I do. That's the good news. I do have I can provide that service through my consulting as a train the train the model. There's also other great organizations that provide that out there. I think just in principle, that's something that provides a ton of value, is equipping
Mhm.
your trainer for those necessary skills and making sure that they have those. Not only just I think some of the train the trainer models that exist today focus so heavily on this idea of design or facilitation and lose this component of what is your role in the organization? How do you work cross-functionally and look at problems in the organization through the learning and development lens? And
Mhm.
how does that work with the other parts of the tools that we need, like design and facilitation? So,
Yeah.
which is one of my focuses, but I think that's also just a valuable thing for trainers in today's world to learn, because that's kind of what's expected of us now. We're wearing a lot of hats, you know.
It's interesting. A lot of times, in some of my past history, trainers were facilitators. They had the same playbook, but when you asked them to design a session, they were like, yeah, that ain't happening. Not
Yeah.
all, not all. I mean, there's some that are very good and very skilled at it. Um, but I like the way you broke it down between curriculum development, instructional design, and facilitation as being three distinctly different skill sets. And like you said, today's training professional is really being asked to do all three, especially in smaller organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can be fun if you're like me and you don't want every day to be the same, but it's
Yeah.
definitely, there's a lot of skills that go into that, and making sure that you're equipped properly for that is a challenge with today, especially when now we're trying to do all those same things in the
Hmm.
virtual world. And what we have to fall back on is our
Yeah.
experience oftentimes in person. Or at least,
Hmm.
a lot of us who maybe been around for a little bit longer in our careers that have kind of gone through the transition pre-COVID to post. It's a lot of us are kind of in the leadership roles and in the positions that are, helping develop the new people coming into training. And our
Hmm.
experience is almost a level set to some extent if you weren't experienced in a virtual model before. So
Yeah.
it's been an interesting challenge to navigate for a lot of organizations.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, are there certain training strategies that contact center organizations really should be incorporating into their methodology, into their processes today,
Yeah,
to make them successful?
absolutely. Well, if you don't have any training strategy, let's start with uh, let's get one. So,
Excellent.
and but I think one training strategy, just kind of piggybacking off what we talked about with providing the necessary skills. I really do think that's a value that
Hmm.
some organizations get it, some don't, and that's okay. Just kind of be honest with where you're at, and if you're not
Yeah.
providing those skills to your team, start there. Make sure that they know professionally how to actually develop content. If you're not getting results in training, I would take a look
Hmm.
back at, are you providing are you providing the right skills to your team to achieve those results?
Yeah.
But with that said, I think some other things that are more just practical or takeaway for your listeners today is just a simple training concept. When you're designing training content, it
Hmm.
should be different if it's in person versus virtual. So a lot of organizations I've worked with, they're trying to take their in-person facilitation that they did, and they're moving it virtual, and they're not designing it for virtual. So what I
Yeah.
mean by that is the good news is the way adults learn hasn't changed since COVID.
Hmm.
So we still have those values of interaction. We have those
Hmm.
values of using reflection and integrating those into our design. But the way that the training is designed is different. So as an example, or something that's a little more concrete, is as simple as interactions online could be using screen share with them to have them demonstrate something, and having them use emojis and stuff to show that they're agreeing. There's different ways you build interaction online, and those are very, very simple, and they can get much more complex in design. But the idea is you can still build for interactivity, you can still build for engagement and design training that way. It's a
Hmm.
different thought though virtually. So I think that's a strategy organizations should be asking themselves: is this training gaining engagement and interaction virtually as it did in person, and it should look different. The activities
Yep.
virtual are different than when you're in person. So that's a practical kind of takeaway for design.
For folks that are looking to become professional trainers, it's not always whoever, for the organizations that are looking for somebody, it's not just someone that knows all the product and service details the best. That's an agent that you just promote them into a training role. That doesn't work out too well typically, does it?
Uh, it's not if you're not equipping them with the right skills. Answering a phone, you may be the best in the world at it, but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you're the best in facilitating. Maybe with the right skills, that's awesome. It's not to say that you shouldn't have those career paths, but you definitely need to be thinking about, if this person moves into a training role, do they have the skills? Have they had the education and the training for them to facilitate? Do they know what facilitation even is compared to lecture? And are they the old subject matter curse? Sometimes there can be a benefit of having a facilitator who doesn't know as much, because they're more likely to facilitate versus just give you all the information.
Is there, as we're sitting here talking, more and more questions are just coming to mind for me, and I love that you and I can just sit here and we can riff for hours on end. I know we have a condensed amount of time, but for someone that's newly coming into a training or training or leadership development type role, is there like a natural career path that you would recommend? Like, should they first become a facilitator, and then into instructional design, and then into curriculum development? Is there a natural progression, or does it really depend on the person?
That's a very good question that I've never really given thought to. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
I would, so I'll kind of work that idea out a little bit. My initial reaction is, I think there is certainly a level of complexity that you can organize those into. Like, I think least complex would be facilitation, although that is definitely its own skill set and much training and things involved with that. Curriculum design involves a little bit, or curriculum design, I kind of look at it as more as like output. So like, hey, here's all the instructional design that's already done, and we just need you to put it together. So you're maybe got a more of an eye for graphic work, and you're kind of following along with the instructional design. And I think instructional design lives in that area of, you should have a good understanding of adult learning. You should know how facilitators work in a classroom. You should know how often you need interaction, how often you need breaks, and how does that design work in person versus online, and what kind of tools do they need. There's a lot more you have a deeper understanding of the learning within an organization at the instructional design level.
Okay.
That's my initial reaction. So I think in a perfect world, that would be great to kind of get experience up through that route. But there's certainly people that I think could be successful moving from, even a subject matter role to an instructional design role, as long as they're being equipped with those skills to think about what instructional design means. But you certainly have a better idea when you've been in a classroom, how to design.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear a recurring theme of train your trainers to become better trainers.
Yeah.
Give them the tools
That's
that
yeah,
they need.
I believe in that. I believe in that across you take away training and insert any career path. I just believe in training, obviously, as a trainer. So I think that's a necessary thing, but it's definitely important. I guess maybe I feel a little more pain around it, just because a lot of consulting work I've done, I've worked with trainers, and it's pretty far and few between when I work with someone who where the story isn't, I've taken phone calls for 4 years. I did a really good job, so they told me to start teaching other people. And that's great, but there's more, I think, to the story of, if you want effective training, that's awesome to take that person. Don't take, keep that career path. That's wonderful, but make sure that they're equipped to be successful in that new role, because it is a different skill set. Just like if you were to take a frontline supervisor and say, you've been doing a great job supervising, you're now going to become the president of the company. A wildly different skill set, between that gap in careers. Yes. So we got to make sure they're prepared for that. But
I love it. I love it. Training is one of those disciplines that really supports the contact center world as we know it, and as we've known it for many years. And the contact center world has just evolved, like at warp speed with technology and
Yeah.
the tools that are available for training and development. How have you seen technology impact the training and development, the L&D discipline, um, from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think I'll get to the elephant in the room, which is spoiler alert, AI. We'll get there, but I think even just kind of seeing the the trend of e-learning and going virtual now, there's a lot more focus around LMSs. LMSs are advancing tremendously, and now we have uh, I think they're called like LMX or LMI. Forgive me if I
Uh-huh.
got that acronym wrong, but effectively it's an AI integrated LMS now that can like search and curate third-party content from YouTube to this Reddit forum and like
Hmm.
curate a learning path for people. So we're seeing a lot of advancements in our capabilities of designing and
Okay.
which has been great. So there's a lot of forward movement there, but I think the listeners are probably more interested in the elephant in the room, which is clearly AI is having the biggest
Yeah.
impact on everything in life right now. But L&D is no different. That's one area where I've been keeping a close trying to keep close on what's happening with that pulse, because it's an important
Mhm.
industry to me. But right now it seems like generative AI is making its way into L&D. I've seen it specifically in the space of HR training, so things like
Mhm.
cybersecurity and harassment training and workplace safety, things like that. And
Mhm.
it's really fascinating. The other thing that this is where I'm kind of going with this is, I think in the very short term, I know there's companies right now who are developing this generative AI training where I feed in an SOP and it
Mhm.
spits out an interactive e-learning on that SOP. So we're going to start to see skills training, I think, come from much more fluent processes like that. So I think those are some big things that we're seeing right now in the industry. Kind of more to come. It seems like every day AI is getting wilder and wilder. I know that there's even some stuff with telephony things where they're starting. You can start to almost respond to AI over a telephone,
Yes.
and it can monitor you. And we're getting ever more evolved with that. But what I will say, and I think this is sort of the principle from a training perspective here,
Mhm.
one of the ideas in training is, the closer you can simulate reality in your training process, the more effective it's going to be. And I think technology is bringing us more and more and more to that reality, where soon it'll be so close to what the world the role is going to be, that I think training is going to become more and more effective. But and I think AI
Yes.
is going to have a huge hand in that for sure.
But the trainer themselves should never be replaced by AI, correct?
Oh yeah, no.
No, no.
That's someone's got to be training the AI, I would think. But it's no, yeah,
Exactly.
I think learning in the someone who's thoughtful about learning in the organization and how those tools are being used, I think that's always going to be a vital role. So yeah, just to be very clear, I didn't mean that AI would replace training, just that it's
Yeah.
feeding us better tools to create better training from.
I I com I completely agree, and I love your example of being able to curate from a lot of different sources, different training curriculum, training modules that can be fed in and massaged, so to speak,
Yeah.
for an organization's needs. A great example of how AI can really have a positive impact. So. Um, so if I'm somebody that has an affinity for training and development, I'm like, gosh, I want to be a training and I want to be an L&D professional. But I don't know where to start. Do you have any tips for success and how the new world of training for someone who is just embarking on their journey? I mean, I think we've hit
Yeah.
on a few things, a few great themes, but what else is out there for them to be looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're just starting out, I would really focus on virtual training methodologies. So learning how virtual design works, how virtual facilitation works. I think those are really critical for the success of an organization right now. So having those skill sets is going to be fantastic. There's tons of certification paths and things through all sorts of different businesses. And I think even Google offers some instructional design stuff as well for that, which is a great place to start if you're brand spanking new.
Yeah.
Another thing I would recommend, I think this is probably the most important thing out of any of those pieces of advice I can give you, is get plugged into your local training networks. They're all over in every country, or I'm sorry, every state, every city, you know, they're all over the place. I know in Minnesota here we have Minnesota Pact, which is one of our training chapters. And some of my best growth, the best mentors, things like that have come from just the people who sat across from me on a table in some random meeting we were in for that, network event. So you make the best relationships. I mean, I think you and I's relationship has really came as a result of networking. And that's, to me, that would be my number one advice. If you're a young person out there trying to get into learning and development, find someone who's in learning and development and become their friend. Bring them some cookies or something. That's how you'll learn the most.
I love that. You're right. There's a lot of industry specific groups, both in person and also online, that that somebody could really take advantage of. I know, I think you and I have talked before, not plugging any particular organization, but ATD, is a great one. There's like you mentioned, Minnesota Pact. Wherever you are, ask the questions of, where do I go? Somebody will know the answer.
They absolutely will. I think that is one of the most powerful tools in my personal career, has been people, really.
Yeah. Awesome. You've had a very successful career, Ben. I mean, we've known each other, for close to 10 years now. And so probably right after you graduated high school, I'm thinking, I don't,
yeah, middle school.
Exactly, middle school. That's what it was. So I'm particularly interested in learning about your thoughts about on this. At this stage in your career, I wish I could go back in time and tell my younger self whatever, and whatever that is, and how would it have helped you navigate your career differently? Not necessarily better, but just differently.
Yeah, that's a big question of what that is. And I think for me, in my personal life and in my professional life, I've definitely been someone who kind of struggles around the idea of perfectionism. And I think that if there was any advice that I could have heard and listened to, because I don't know if I would have listened to it early in my career, but it would have been, you don't need the perfect plan to take a step. I think that it's okay to recognize that you're never going to have, as an organization, for anyone listening, like, you're never going to have the perfect training execution. You're never going to have the perfect customer experience execution. It's just not going to happen. And that's always our goal, is excellence. We always want to drive our best, but it's okay to start somewhere and to learn through experience and to begin taking steps towards your goal. But and I think that could have definitely helped change some things. There's been a few things in my professional life that I could have done sooner, could have accomplished sooner, could have certified done those things, if I wasn't like, I have to have all of the right variables in place. And once those are in place, then I can move. And I think that's an important thing. And maybe if there's any listeners here for any context, whether it's training, customer experience, if it's, technology in the industry, it's okay to start with an imperfect plan. I mean, try to get some plan together, but not everything is going to always be falling into place anyway. So
don't let perfection be an obstacle to progress.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. I think that's very fair. Sometimes, we get in our own way more than anything else.
Yeah. I love how you frame that. I don't know that I would have listened to myself, back in my earlier career,
I don't know. If there's anything, the more in the career of learning and development I've gone, the more I realize how little I know. That's but yeah, it's interesting.
And well, Ben, we got to the point of our conversation. We call it the speed round. Are you ready for this?
Oh man, yeah, ready.
All right. Now, let's start off with the first question. What fact about Ben would people be surprised to learn about you?
I'm a metalhead and an avid guitar player. So little.
Yeah, I was surprised when you first told me that. years
My
ago, and
demeanor
I
is
was
pretty
like,
calm, but I love
yeah.
to get in the car and listen to a bunch of aggressive dudes scream at me, I guess. I don't know. But that's what I like. So.
I remember seeing something that you had put out there, and I was like, oh my God, I think I'm scared now. You know?
Yeah, I
And
don't know.
it's
I
good
just
stuff. I mean, hey,
yeah.
that's awesome. That's awesome. It was surprising to learn that about you. Um, the so what's your so dovetailing in, what's your go-to tactic for unwinding after a stressful day?
So listening to metal's too obvious here, I think. So
Yeah.
one of my other real go-to tactics is I'm an avid disc golfer. So I love to,
Okay.
if I've had a stressful day, pick up the bag and go out to one of the parks and play some disc golf.
Nice. I thought you were going
Yeah.
to go with something else.
What did you
Yeah.
think I was gonna go with?
I thought you were going to go with gaming,
Oh, that's a big
something
part
in,
of my life too. Yeah.
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 Uh,
Yep, that or yeah. I was also thinking like, I definitely I have a dog who's a Great Pyrenees, a big old fluff ball, and I
uh,
do love just, when he's laying on the floor, if I'm having a stressful day, I'll just lay next to him and give him some pats. He loves that. So
nice. That is awesome. That
yeah.
is awesome. Ben, this has been a great conversation. And I know, we just touched on some real basics, today when it comes to training and learning and development. But if someone wants to pick your brain about training, leadership development, what conferences or events that you may be attending, or, hey, can you help me from a consultative service, help me with this problem? How could they get in contact with you? What's the best way to do?
Yeah. So email is a great way, which is just benjamin.gertz@gmail. It's a fantastic way. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's a great place
Okay.
to network with me. As far as events go, MWCCA is going to be hosting an event. I think it's around January that we haven't determined the date exactly, but you can stay up to date around that if you're in the Midwest through their website. And I'll be
Hmm.
leading a seminar on de-escalation skills. So you could receive some
Awesome.
training in person around that. And I think it'll be around the January timeframe next year.
Excellent. Just in time for winter. Is
Just
this
in
the
time for winter.
is this Minneapolis or Chicago chapter?
Minneapolis chapter. Yep.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
real cold, but
Yeah. Hey,
learn how to deal with them angry customers.
it's all good. It's all good. Um, well, and as always, if anybody reaches out to me, wants me to make an introduction to Ben, I'd be more than happy to. Ben and I, like I said, we've known each other for 10 years. I personally have seen his output, and it is absolutely amazing. So if you're looking for someone with a consultative approach around training to help you. Ben is one of the best out here. So, Ben, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. And I am actually very humbled to have you on this episode of Coffee Talk with
Oh
me.
man, thank you.
Uh,
I'll try to get through the door with my head, but I don't know if
yeah.
that's
We just got to grease
no,
it up a
really.
bit.
Yeah, that'll make it a little easier.
There
But
you go.
hey, no, thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure. Yeah, it's an honor to be on here. So I appreciate being your guest.
Fantastic. And as always, if you like this episode, you want to see more of it, please provide me some feedback. If you want me to get Ben back on again to dive into a specific topic, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to do that. And love to have you back on at some point in time in the future, Ben.
Great. Sounds good,
All
Mark.
right.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Y'all have a great rest of the day now.